If you told me a few years ago that I'd start making Adventure Time videos and that Betty of all characters would be the one that I've now made multiple solo videos on, I would have thought you were crazy, but this is where we are right now. We're somehow on Adventure Time grind mode, the brain rot's real, and the Betty brain rot is very real. Something that I found really interesting ever since the finale of Fiona and Cake is that there's been a little bit of a divisive take on what exactly it is about Betty's character that sort of inspired her to send Simon into Shermie's body. A lot of people took offense to this and thought that it was very self-centered of Betty, stripping him of his identity and who he is and all the people he knew to send him into the future was uncalled for. While I can understand that, a lot of people have started calling her very petty and self-centered because of this. And personally, I don't agree with that at all. I think that is actually really, really crazy because Betty, in my opinion, is like the complete opposite. Because she wanted to ensure that he was alive still, she had to do some drastic measures using the abilities that she was only given because she sacrificed herself. Betty be considered petty is ridiculous. It is incredibly antithetical to what her character actually is as a whole, being someone who sacrificed everything for Simon. And we get that strictly shown to us multiple times throughout Fiona and Cake in a very blunt and realistic way, in my opinion. Before I get into that, I just want to say thank you all so much. We just hit 7,000 subs. We're only 3K away from getting the tattoo goal, which is crazy. If you guys want to help support the channel, please consider subscribing down below. There's a vast percentage of you who are not subscribed yet, and the algorithm's doing pretty well with these videos, so it would mean a lot. And I know I look like the Avatar guy right there, and we're not going to question it. It's cold right now. It's finally getting to chilly weather type things. We'll move on from that. Petty is honestly one of the last words I would use to describe Betty as a character. She is, in my opinion, very smart, courageous, and most importantly, devoted. You know, she's an incredibly loving partner who only wants Simon's safety and to be with Simon more than anything in the world. Now, that obviously says a lot about like her self-worth, which we're not going to get into right now, but it goes to show that she puts him on a pretty high pedestal and is the thing that she lives for. As sad as that might seem to some people, it's true. And a lot of people obviously really found that amazing about her. She was so devoted. She was willing to do anything off rip in this new world she had no idea about to save Simon. And that shows a lot of dedication. Even when Simon is reverted to Ice King, her entire motivation in the story is to save Simon, inadvertently causing herself to go insane through this dilemma. The hero is very devoted to their goal. They achieve their goal, but they themselves have to have a massive sense of tragedy at the end of the day, which I think is honestly kind of hilarious since these two are from the past where those stories were very commonplace. It makes sense that they would fall into this type of story themselves. There's obviously that other parallel of the idea of the witch being the person who causes the hero to fall into that sense of tragedy. Betty looks like a witch and uses Maja, the Sky Witch, to get into this scenario. I just think that's a really cool thing as well. I just wanted to throw that in. While devoted is what I would consider a great word to describe Betty, I'd say the most accurate word is impulsive, because Betty is an incredibly impulsive character, willing to do pretty much anything to ensure she's able to keep Simon safe. Is that entirely a good thing? Of course it's not, because it's making her seem as though she is subservient and a tool that's only used to ensure he is safe and that he gets what he wants, because she sees something in him that no one else does. And I think that sense of validation that he gets what he wants is sort of reciprocated as her getting what she wants, which is to be with him. She finds her purpose in the world through him finding his. And I think that's a very beautiful pairing between the two, and I love it a lot. But I think the impulsive nature is really interesting because it makes a lot of sense why she eventually would turn into Golb. Golb is obviously meant to be this entity of pure chaos, unachievable, unattainable, and unable to be communicated with, as we see with the Lich and Golb. She became Golb because she wanted to save him, and eventually with Simon becoming the one who's devoted to finding her. Very interesting mirror imagery. Now, Betty's wish obviously was to ensure that Simon was safe, and that's what caused her to fuse into Golb. Now, we don't entirely know how in there Betty actually is, or if Betty is even Betty anymore, and they're not just some sort of new entity being Goal Betty. When Simon eventually meets Betty and talks to her again, he only considers her Betty the entire time, without realizing that she has changed an extreme amount. We see that Betty is still depicted as a goddess at the start of the story, but at the end, it's Goal Betty, because it shows that he has moved on and views her as something different and is able to let go of that past image of her and move on with his life as well. And this is only possible because of what Betty was able to do by sending him into the future, by having him realize the real ramifications of what they did in their relationship. She allowed him to get some closure and move on. And I would say, even though a lot of people consider this petty, I think she's doing this for him still, because Simon clearly is incredibly devoted to her as well. They are star-crossed lovers, willing to do anything for each other. So it makes a lot of sense that he would be equally as devoted to saving her, because he finds his purpose in her, just like she did with him. Being sent to the future, reading the Caspar Nova book, and getting a sort of reality check on what their relationship was is very telling. And I think it's very, very cool that he kind of got babied down. And I think it's kind of hilarious because Simon's like in his 50s. He still had to be babied down and told, like, look, your relationship was like this. You might not realize it, but this is what it was. And eventually he realizes that he has self-worth and he has a reason to live on instead of just focusing on other people. And I think that's really great because it parallels Betty's journey as well. She focused so much on Simon that she let go of herself, and Simon was doing the same thing. He was falling into that same sort of pit that he was in. With Goal being this sort of dimension beyond all dimensions, I highly doubt time would pass at all for Simon, meaning he'd be able to just stay there until he has that wake-up call. And sure, that could have been pretty bad. Let's be serious. He could have been, separated from all his friends and loved ones, but at that point, he still would have had that sense of guilt and sadness within him. Betty basically gave him a infinitely long amount of time to think about who he is as a person and realize how much he meant to her. And I wouldn't consider that petty at all. I'd say that's a genuinely great moment that shows how much she cares about him. And we see that at the bus stop scene. When he tries to do what she wants, it clearly isn't going to pan out that way because that's not how the past went. But then Betty says a really great line, "But I don't have a single regret." And I think that's a really amazing line because it shows, even though people could interpret it as Betty being petty, like, oh, I didn't get what I wanted. No, Betty did get what she wanted. She was able to be with Simon. She was able to live a happy life. She was able to save him and do what she wanted with a smile on her face after turning into this insane god monster. I definitely think there's nothing petty about this. I think this is the ultimate showing of love and sacrifice in the whole series. Let me know what you think of Betty down below, because this character has given me some crazy brain rot, I'm gonna be honest. I think I'm so invested in this character right now because there's already been so many moments with a lot of these other characters that we've seen for years and years and years, but Betty is finally getting her moment in the spotlight. I've always considered her an S tier, but now she's like really cooking with gas after Fiona and Cake, so I can't wait to see if the writers do anything more with their character. I'm gonna be honest, I don't think they really need to. I think they really hit the mark on the head and just like straight into the I don't know, sports analogy isn't my thing. Basically, they killed it with this one. Her character arc had an amazing finale. She was great basically the second she entered the show, and I personally think she marked like a specific new era of the show. She's one of those. She's one of those characters. Before I end this video, I just want to give a super genuine shout out to one of my friends, Ruby. They saw my Prismo video that I released not that long ago. I got really inspired and decided to make this like fan comic sort of thing. I obviously gave it a read at this point, and it was super great. The art is obviously incredible, as you can see right here, and I'm not going to show you much of it because I don't want to ruin the emotional damage it'll give you, but I'd highly recommend you give it a read. All the links will be in the description below, and if I can, they're in that card right there in the corner. That's going to be it from me. Hope you enjoyed. Take care, and have a good one.